Hey guys, yesterday Apple had the last big conference of 2020 and they announced the new Apple M1 chip. And this is an Apple chip. It's their own silicon, it's not an Intel chip or anything like that. And they're going to be putting it into all of their Macs. So far they're putting it into the new Apple MacBook Air, the new Apple MacBook Pro 13 and the new Apple Mac Mini. And you can see here M1 chip models available from 17th of November, which at the time of the announcement, it was 1 week, but 6 days from the time of recording. So this is a system of a chip which has some upsides and downsides, because it means that the RAM and the GPU and everything's integrated into one chipset, which from an upgrade point of view means that you're tied into Apple's ridiculous upgrade policy. You basically can't do anything once you've bought the laptop or the computer. But it also means that they're able to get a lot more from it. They can optimize and make things a little bit thinner. And at least from an endurance point of view, that seems to be one of the main benefits of this here. I mean, 20 hours of battery with the MacBook Pro 13 is what they're claiming, up to 18 with the MacBook Air. And that's really, really impressive. You know, the prices are what you would expect from an Apple MacBook, so I guess no surprises there. But this does look interesting. I'm not going to say it doesn't look interesting. It is, and it's without doubt groundbreaking for what they're doing. 5 nanometer with 16 billion transistors. And they're claiming here the world's fastest CPU core and low power silicon, the world's best CPU performance per watt, the world's fastest integrated graphics, 3.5 times faster CPU performance, 6 times faster GPU performance, 15 times faster machine learning. Now, this is kind of what I want to talk about in this video. I really don't want to talk too much about the chip itself because it does look good. I don't want to talk even about these new laptops and computers from Apple either. Really what I want to talk about is my frustrations as a consumer, as a tech enthusiast, I guess, my frustrations with having to navigate Apple's marketing, I'll say it politely, BS, their BS marketing. Now, we all know that Apple is a computing company, but it's also a marketing company, and this is really how they make their money. But it can be very, very frustrating, especially if you want to know what you're actually buying. You can see this is my 4 main laptops, I guess, just now. Well, I'm selling that, and this has been claimed by the wife, but these are the 2 main laptops I use, a Dell XPS 13, a Dell Alienware gaming laptop with a 2080, etc. But with all of these laptops, I know what's inside this, and it's the same with my phones. I know the CPU is in there, I know what to expect, but it's a little bit different with Apple. And we've seen that recently with the new Apple iPhone 12. They don't tell you that the iPhone 12 and 12 mini has got 4 gigabytes of memory and the Pro and Pro Max have got 6 gigabytes of memory. It's not on the website. It doesn't tell you that. You need to go to other websites and find that out. And it's the same story here with this Apple M1 chip. So as someone who's interested in new technology and all that, I'm trying to navigate through all the marketing crap and try to figure out what's right and what's wrong here. Now, they're normally on the money roughly, not right on the money, but as far as the battery life claims, I'm sure the battery life claims are pretty good, and I'm sure it's close to that under less than ideal situations, turning off Wi-Fi and all that. But it looks like battery life is going to be good, and Macs are always they're always recommended for their great battery life. But when you go through the press release and you look at the 1 hour conference, which I've kind of skipped through, you're welcome to watch through it all, but when you go through that, you start seeing graphs like this: CPU performance versus power, M1 chip, latest PC laptop chip. Very vague there, isn't it? Very vague what they're saying here, but effectively what they're trying to tell you here is for 10 watts, you only get this amount of performance from the latest PC laptop chip, which is so vague. But with the M1, you get almost twice as performance, up to twice, 2 times faster CPU performance, matches peak PC performance using 25% of the power. Fine. And you kind of see this throughout their whole marketing thing. If you go through, I skipped through this to just see the graphs and the tables and stuff. If you go through this, you will see lots of claims like this about 4 times the speed, 5 times the speed and all that. This is the 9to5 Mac article. This kind of summarizes a lot of the key points. I'd recommend looking at that rather than the whole conference if you want to get an idea of what's going on here. You can see the GPU and the DRAM and the cache and all that all in one chipset. And yeah, that's helping you understand what's going on here. But what's not helping you understand what's going on here is the actual website and the sales material where it's making all these claims. This is the MacBook Pro 13. And if you scroll down, see the top of the CPU. With the GPU, they're saying up to 5 times faster graphics performance, and there's the number 8. And they do this with a lot of the features. Now, if you go down to the bottom of the page, you can start to put the whole picture together. So down at the bottom of the sales page, you will see all the little notes, and check out the specs yourself. But down here, this is what I want to show you. Now, you've got all these notes here, and this is where all these claims are coming from. So you'll see this, like testing conducted by Apple in October 2020 using a pre-production 13-inch MacBook Pro system with an Apple M1 chip. Okay, so they're comparing the 13-inch MacBook Pro 13, the new one, and as well as a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i7 based 13-inch MacBook Pro system. So when they're talking about all these claims about 2 times faster CPU performance per watt, and they're talking about comparing it against the latest PC laptop chip, well, they're not telling you exactly what they're comparing it against. So you need to do a little bit more investigation yourself. And this is the MacBook Pro 16. This is not one that's been upgraded, but this is how they do it. Processor 2.6 gigahertz, 6-core Intel Core i7. They don't tell you the actual CPU which you're actually buying. So you need to then go to websites such as Every Mac and look at the model that you ordered, and it'll tell you all the specifications. Or you can look on Wikipedia. So if we go back to this sales page of the MacBook Pro 13, you can see again, most of these comparisons, I think all of them seem to be against the 1.7 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i7 based 13-inch. Say that 10 times fast. But looking at it here, there's 2 models of the Apple MacBook Pro 13 in 2020. You've got this model here and this model here, and it depends on which option you go for. It depends which CPU route you go down. But they're comparing it against the quad-core 1.7 gigahertz. It's not the top of the range CPU. There was faster CPUs available, but they're basing it on this, the i7 8557U. So I'm not 100% about this. This is just me, kind of looking at this today, but looking at that 1.7 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i7 based 13-inch, looking at it, that's the CPU they're talking about, the i7 8557U. Now, for those of you who don't know this, and I'm not an Apple hater, by the way, I've got an Apple phone coming, I've had an Apple iMac in the past, and the reason I'm looking at this whole conference is because I would be willing to trade these in to buy a MacBook if it was the right one. But what's a lot of people don't realise, especially some fanboys, is that Apple are normally about a generation behind with CPUs. For about half the year, they're about a generation behind with the CPUs. They also do some other sneaky things as well. For example, the MacBook Pro 13 in the past, they would throttle the CPU, so you wouldn't actually get the full performance of the i9 because they had to keep the thermals down and the fan noise down. So they throttle the CPU and not really tell people about that. And this came up in the benchmarks. But they are normally like a generation behind with CPUs. Not always, but normally. Now this CPU is this one, the i7 8557U. It's an energy efficient CPU, but at this time, this is about a year, 15 months old at this point, a year or so. It's not the latest PC chip. It is not the latest CPU. Not by a long shot. Now they're saying that the latest PC laptop chip, it's about 15 months or so, maybe a year since we saw it on lots of laptops. So they're kind of being a little bit sneaky, a little bit bending the truth a little bit as far as, how much faster this new M1 chip is. Now, that chip, if you look into it, there's a lot of benchmarks out here. And, before anyone says this, yes, benchmarks, these websites, always take them a pinch of salt. You really want to look at a lot of different websites for benchmarks and comparisons. But if you look here, you can see that, the comparison here as far as performance goes, you can see this here, the average CPU mark was 7820. So people have submitted the benchmarks. For that CPU, they're making a comparison of there. The average CPU score was 7820. Now you can see here the AT750H has got a much higher score. Now that's not as energy efficient. That's actually what's in this laptop here. And it's a good CPU. But that CPU is almost about 2 years old at this point. We've since seen the 9750H, the 10750H there, And it's not long until we see the 1158. So you can see the 8750H was launched in the summer of 2018, and that gives you better performance in the CPU, which they're using for comparisons. Then you've got the 9750H, and then you've got the 10750H, which came out last summer. So again, that's maybe not a fair comparison because the 8557U is more energy efficient. You know, you can see here, I think it's 28 watts or something. 15 watts, I'm getting mixed up. 15 watts for that CPU, that's really good. It's energy efficient. And the fact that that's competing with, I think the 8750H is a 45 watt. Yeah, 45 watt CPU. The fact that it's quite close to that performance is really good. But again, to go back to their marketing stuff, they're using all these graphs in their conference, in their slides, talking about the latest CPU, the latest PC chip, and all this. They're really not telling you the full story here. What they're saying is this new M1 chip performs twice as good with 10 watts than a 1.7 gigahertz 8557U, which came out about a year ago at this point. So again, I'm not trying to criticize this M1 chip. Looking at the M1 chip, it is groundbreaking in many respects as far as it's moving things forward. You're getting more battery life. They're obviously going to make it thinner, and yes, it looks like it's energy efficient and you get great performance per watt. But they're very misleading with their marketing material here. So what I would say for anyone who's interested in buying one of the new Apple M1 systems, first is check that the software that you use on a regular basis is going to work with it, because I know, for example, Photoshop and a few other Adobe apps aren't going to be ready for another month or two, and there are going to be a lot of apps that just don't work well with it, at least in the beginning. I'm sure they will be fixed later, but at least in the beginning. But also wait until we get some benchmarks for these new computers. I don't think we should always rely on specifications when it comes to CPU and GPU and this, this draws this amount of watts. It all comes down to benchmarks. And it goes back to what I said with the i9 CPUs in the MacBook Pros a few years ago, where they said there was an i9, it was this chip, but you were only really getting about 70 to 80% of that performance because it was getting throttled. So this new chip looks good. The new laptops look good. You're paying a hefty premium because you have to upgrade the RAM because you can't really upgrade things. They do look like nice laptops and computers, but Apple's marketing here is sneaky, to say the least. And I would say they're actually lying in many areas. If you look at their slides as far as the latest PC chip, it's not the latest PC chip. It's a year old, that PC chip. There's newer CPUs out that are being used in Windows laptops and computers. And it's very misleading what they're doing with their graphs. So do your research, guys. Wait for some reviews with these products before you start dropping your money. Yeah, they look good, but this whole marketing direction that Apple have been going over the last few years, I really don't like this vague, creating their own terminology and, just saying we are fast, 5 times faster, 6 times faster. 5 times faster than what? Tell us a CPU, tell us what GPU you're comparing it against. And then that allows us consumers, tech enthusiasts, anyone really that uses anything, it allows us to make an informed decision. And really that's what we all want to do. Thanks for watching, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And just to clarify, I'm not an Apple fanboy. I don't hate on them either. I do think they're overpriced for a lot of the computing, but I just don't like their whole marketing direction, the way that they take their whole conferences and their sales material. I'm getting confused here, I've got 2 mics. I don't like the way they do this. I think it's very misleading, and I think it's confusing a lot of people in the industry. I'd like to see them clarify that. But over to you guys. Let me know what you think about it. Please do leave a comment below, and I'll speak to you all in the next one. Take care.